Nick Gibson, publishing with XProc. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Nick. I feel like a bit like an Alcoholics Anonymous thing here. I'm Nick and I'm an XML geek. Oh, sorry. What I want to talk about is something that probably a vast number of the people who are doing things to do with publishing here deal with, which is the fact that, unfortunately, authors like to write in Microsoft Word. I hate to say this, but yes, they do. Most people who write stuff for a living want to write in Microsoft Word. From the point of view of us, the people who are processing this, manipulating it, wanting to pull it apart, wanting to analyze it, that's just really not a good thing. So I've spent much of the last few years working on tools that say, take your content out of Microsoft Word and put it into something better, richer, .book, JATS, some sort of nice format, nice from our point of view. Sadly, not nice at all from the author's point of view. So, over the last few years, I've ended up building a toolkit, I guess. A bunch of tools that make it easier, and a bunch of approaches that make it easier to taking a bit of Word content, so XML, but frankly, utterly unstructured, and converting it into something much more useful. It's really intended for sort of batch translation. It's not a toolkit that you would want to use if you were, or even a set of approaches you'd want to use if you were taking a single file and converting it to an ebook or something. So we're using this at LexisNexis, and I think the largest batch of files we work on is about 105,000 documents in the batch. So, authors write. This is a problem. Authors like to write in Microsoft Word. And generally, any approach that makes them write in a structured format tends to fail. They find ways around it. Because, I mean, if you think about when you write a document, you probably, most of us, probably don't think, right, I'll start a section, and inside that section I'll write a title, and inside that I'll write a paragraph. What you actually do is you write some words down, and you think, oh, needed a title there, and you go back up to the top and you mark that as a title. We think in terms of formatting, we think linearly. So we need a way to get around that. The problem in publishing, especially somewhere like legal publishing, is that the author is unfortunately more important than I am. That means I cannot impose things on him. I've got to work around him. So we're the clever technical folks. We should be able to work out a way that if an author can put just enough structure in there that we can cope, we should be able to pull out that structure and turn it into something more useful. We do the hard bits. So there's got to be a solution to this. There are lots of solutions to this. I'm talking about just one of them. We want to turn Microsoft Word content into structured XML. Probably semantically rich XML. And the only semantics we've got to play with to start with here are whatever the style names are in Word. Now, what we want to do is make this into an industrialized process. One of the things that implies is that we need to be able to reuse any code we write. So we're probably going to do all the heavy lifting here with XSLT because XSLT is cool and lovely and it's just very good for this sort of thing. But we really want to be able to do it so that we can use those bits of XSLT again and again and again. We don't want to have to write a new transformation each time. Between one set of Word documents with one style sheet and one set of Word documents with, no, they call them templates, don't they? Template, there are massive differences. But all those differences are at a high level. They're things that we can use as hints to tell us. In Word, the only thing that says it's a heading is that it's got a style that says heading 1 or something. It's just a paragraph otherwise. But the fact that it says heading 1 gives us something to start working with. So if we take all the things we know, styles are useful. Word is got paragraphs in it, and it is to some extent XML. And we're clever people. We can write XSLT that matches that. And we can write XSLT that transforms that word into rich XML. And it's really, really painful. I don't know, how many people have done that and tried it? It hurts, doesn't it? Almost all of us have done it. Now, what we'd like nice to do would be take this and turn it into little steps, because every time you break down a problem into little steps, it gets easier. So we want to take something that looks like that, which actually is just 3 paragraphs in Word. It's an ugly format, isn't it? And if you think, I think what Microsoft did when they designed WordML, using WordML here to mean all the different variants of it, because the difference between 2003, 2007, 2010 is at the most a namespace most of the time. What they did was they looked at HTML4 and went, let's make it uglier. And for some reason, and I've never got someone at Microsoft to explain this to me, they decided that all the attributes had to be namespaced. Everything important had to be in an attribute value except runs of text. I think, who knows C++? That's a C++ object dump, I reckon. The way Microsoft did this was they said we have to maintain total compatibility with the binary format, and the binary format is basically a bunch of C++ objects. So let's just dump them into XML. And I reckon that's what you got there. So if we're going to transform that, well, what have we got here? We've got a paragraph. It's probably a title, because we know it's got heading 1 there. We've got another normal paragraph. And we've got a list item. Probably the biggest nightmare of transforming out of Word is the way it handles lists. It handles them by marking them as paragraphs as a straight series, and it tells you what level of depth it's got, and it tells you it's a list paragraph. It's a good start, but it gets us somewhere. So, really, that's all we've got here. We've got an important title, normal paragraph, and a bulleted paragraph. What we want to get out at the end of that is something like this, which I hope, no, it's still not valid, .book, is it? It's so long since I've done .book, I've forgotten about it. There's a hyphen in there that shouldn't be there. So we've got a title. Sorry? We've got a title, we've got a paragraph, itemized list, list item, paragraph. And we're going to have to synthesize some of that, because some of that doesn't actually exist in Word. There's nothing that wraps lists in Word. So we're going to have to think of ways to add that. This is the sort of problems you're going to have to approach when you convert any word processing format. And the difference between OpenOffice XML and this is that the OpenOffice XML is slightly less insane, but not much less structured. Much more structured, sorry. So, what I wanted to suggest is the idea of progressive enhancement. This is very close to what... brain's gone, sorry. Last presentation, George's presentation, last but one, sorry. It's talking about the idea of pipelining our changes. We need to start out with WordML. We throw it some sort of transformation. Then we put another transformation through it. Then we put another one, until we get to Nirvana, where Nirvana is your favorite form of document markup. If you break a transformation down into a series of steps, it will become more reusable, simpler to solve, and much more testable. I've seen Word transformations where you have a single style sheet that transforms the whole thing into WordML. Thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code. When it goes wrong, you're stuck. So if we can break that problem down into a series of steps, all becomes a lot easier. There are common processes. We might want to convert it into an intermediate neutral format. And at LexisNexis, what we've actually been doing is we've converted it into basically HTML5. Because HTML5's got just about enough structure. It's got places we can string off extra attributes to provide information that we need to carry through from Word. We might want to specialize the elements. We don't want everything to be paragraphs when we come out at the other end. And in fact, if we're in a sort of legal publishing world, we might want things like clause groups and clauses. We might want group blocks. There is a form of markup you may have seen if you've ever dealt with relatively old Word documents, where a block is indicated by a paragraph in a particular style to mark the beginning of it, and a paragraph in a particular style to mark the end of it. And everything in there is then a block. This is caused by the fact Word doesn't have sections. We might want to turn those into some sort of structure. We might add real sections driven by the headings. All of these things are entirely repeatable. If we can convert into a neutral format into the middle, we can supply exactly the same transformations each time. Sort of thing I'm talking about. Start off. Our important title, our paragraph, our list item, but it came from Word, so all we know is that actually it's a list item. Our initial transformation just takes the Word elements and converts them into the obvious HTML element, but it doesn't do anything else. They're in the wrong order, I apologize. Number 2 and number 1 are switched. Probably makes more sense the other way around. So, first step, we turn the heading 1 into an H1. Second step, we do something about that list paragraph. Third step, we wrap the list. These are the sort of things that are easy to do as separate transformations. So we need an environment that makes that easy. We need to be able to pipeline. We need to make it simple to use. To make it simple to use, what we really want to be able to do is so that the person who's building this doesn't have to understand the pipeline itself. They just be able to concentrate on the transformations. We need it to be configured so that they can say, I want you to do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. And we want to be able to avoid repetition. We don't want to have to build up lots of processes. You could do this in XSLT with modes. But every time you're going to do that, you're going to end up building a really complicated style sheet. You're going to need to write new XSLT for the next bit of processing. So what we want to be able to do is take that out of the XSLT environment and actually put that into a configuration file. So, how are we going to do this? I think there are 3 ways to do this. The first thing is pipe the XML through something. XProc is the obvious answer here because it's a pipelining tool that is natively XML friendly. We want to generate some XSLT from configuration because some of our transformations are so trivially simple that we really don't want to have to write them. We want to write a configuration file which says do this. We want a manifest file that describes that processing. So, what about XProc? XProc gets it almost all the way there on its own. It's a bit hard to get started with. Who knows XProc here? Good, I'm not going to have to explain too much. So, the basic function, the basic unit of XProc is the step. We declare them, we use built-in steps. The basic unit of data going through it is an input or an output on a pipe. We've defined some here, P input, the P inputs, sorry, the 2 P inputs and the P output. One of these says this is the source, the other says this is some parameters. XProc parameter ports are really easy once you get your head around them, but basically it's a way to pass around XSLT parameters from outside. We want an output, so we're going to say read some input, pass it to the output. So as a naive approach to doing this, we could say, let's just write a bunch of XSLT steps. Our first XSLT says, convert that style sheet, read the style sheet called Word to HTML5, so clearly we can work out what that's going to do, and I'm not going to bother to show you the style sheet. Read the input to the entire step, pipe that output of that piece of XSLT straight to another one, and that other one wraps some blocks up. That's the markup I was mentioning earlier of start element, start paragraph, end paragraph. Unfortunately, annoyingly common. So, what would be really nice is if we could avoid that. So how about we write a manifest file? They're easy. Then we need something to read that manifest file and say, run through this, thread our document through those transformations. Do that in XProc. High level, this is the entirety of the framework at the highest level. There are two steps, custom step, load a manifest and run the threaded XSLT. The rest of it says, load my custom steps, read our manifest, read our document, process it. It's that simple at the highest level. At Lexis, we've actually got this abstracted even further, so it reads a directory, feeds all the documents in the directory through.
Can I ask a question about the load? If you go to step one, is this load sequence from file? Is this a sort of a boilerplate?
Yes, these are boilerplate steps. This is load sequence from file. I'm sorry if that's entirely illegible at the back, but that's the smallest I could make it. And I've removed 90% of the code anyway. This is a massively simplified version because this manifest in the real world allows us to do grouping so that we can set the base for things, so we pass metadata through to it, so that you can set XSL params from it. It allows you to do import statements so you can break it down, because in the real world, we want to maximize the possibilities of reuse. So this relies on one of the brilliant features of XProc, which is in XSLT, we have sequences of nodes. In XProc, we can have sequences of documents. And that is incredibly useful for this sort of thing. So what we're doing is we're reading a file, whatever is on the source. We tell it, make our iteration source, so whatever is going to be loaded in each step. We load it from the load manifest step. We set up a variable. Obviously, this is pulled from a bigger style sheet, so the base URI's calculations are slightly more complicated. We load the document. The result of something like this in XProc is the sequence of the result of those loads. So the result of this step is just all the style sheets in a sequence. That's simple. Then we need to evaluate them. This gets huge. Now, when I started doing this, I hit a real problem with XProc. The problem was that XProc doesn't give me a way to thread a document through a sequence of operations when those operations are not described as steps. This stopped me dead, first of all, because I originally wrote this framework in Perl. It gave me two limitations, really. I mean, the first was it was stuck with XSLT1, the second was I wrote it in Perl. But that was easy. I could just write a loop, and it threaded it through. And that concept didn't exist in XProc, so I went onto the XProc mailing list, and Romain Deltour made the obvious statement of, just do it with recursion. At which point I felt stupid and went away and did it with recursion. So all we're doing here is, we take the first style sheet off the top of the list, we see how many are left, we run that style sheet against the input document. Then we decide if we need to recurse or not by counting the number of style sheets we have left in our sequence. If we've got more than 0, we actually just call ourselves again with the rest of the sequence and the output of the style sheet. Otherwise, we give up, we terminate, and we pass back the finally processed document. So that gives us the framework to run our progressive enhancements in. Just doing that has taken away much of the effort. We've focused it on which XSLT transforms do I need to apply to my document, rather than how do I write an XSLT that will encapsulate all the complex things I need to do. XProc made that easy. But there was one more clever step that someone proposed to me a while back, and I thought, oh, clever idea, so I did it, which was to extend the manifest slightly. You can see here that that manifest has got a processed item added to it. And that says, apply this style sheet to the item listed inside, and then the result of that will be another style sheet that you can then apply to the input document. And what we're doing it against are these map files at the bottom. And this particular map file says, find an element called P, look for an attribute called cword style. If that style has value title, change the element to a heading, and stick in a heading level 1 attribute so that later on we can use that to introduce structure into the document. If it's a subtitle, call it an H2. And that means that I didn't have to write that style sheet, which is absolutely repetitive and really boring. I don't like writing boring code. That's not fun. I don't want to do the same thing again and again and again. So I can just use simple metaprogramming to actually write a style sheet that then I apply to my document. So, this is a way to simplify your processing. One of the things that I realized, having done this for about 5 years, was that you can do this to anything. It doesn't have to be a Word document. Any time you need to do a sequence of repetitive transformations to a large number of XML documents, this just gives you an easy way to do it. The whole idea of progressively enhancing it allows you to break down your styles, break down your transformations, sorry. XProc gives us the ability to hide all the complexity there. The top level, we're going to have 2 steps in our XProc statement, and that will do everything for us. So everything that's really complicated has been moved off to the configuration file. The other thing I realized that was that writing style sheets that write style sheets is brilliant, and I now spend far too much time doing it. And please, Norm, next version of XProc, can we have something that allows us to thread?
I'm trying to work out what the semantics of that are. Let me talk about that.
The code that does this is all open source. As you can probably tell from the names of the projects, I have absolutely no imagination whatsoever for naming things.
But did you really create a domain called GitBub?
No, you're right. Not only that, I can't spell. When I get home, I will be in deep trouble. My wife is a proofreader.
Surely she's in deep trouble.
She did say, are you sure you don't want me to proofread that? So the tools are online. Please feel free to have a play with them. There's a lot more documentation on GitHub. And if you can think of a decent name for them, please tell me. Thank you. Any questions?
Could you contrast that with the way I might have, if I'd done this, tackled it, which would have been to take your manifest and then write a style sheet that wrote the XProc pipeline for me?
I think they're identical. The reason I didn't do it that way was that I didn't want to have 2 XProc processes. I know that within Calabash I could have evaled it, but I found trouble with it using the Calabash eval statement sometimes. So if I had arbitrary large numbers of inputs and output ports, it got conceptually very hard to handle. So yes, I could have written that, but it meant that I couldn't write it in entirely pure XProc. I'd had to use extensions, or I'd have had to make it a multi-stage process, which would have meant then I needed another program to wrap the program that wrapped the programs.
XProc is very good at encapsulating that CX eval. So we don't expose that evaluation, so you don't see it. You can just encapsulate it.
Yep, I wanted to try and do it without using eval, especially as I'd broken eval several times. Hi. Jim.
Thank you. Do you have a sense of the penalty in performance when you decompose these things down versus having them all in one style sheet?
I found there's about a 10% performance drop. I don't care about that performance drop. Frankly, I'd rather have something that's maintainable to fast. Mike.
I know you're primarily talking about your solution rather than the problem, but I'm interested in an aspect of the problem, which is your authors liking to write in Word. When I've seen that problem, I've seen it in a considerable spectrum in terms of how much you can control the way they use Word. And that affects the solution a lot.
It does.
If you can give your authors a template and, you know, this is a form-filling task, fill in this form, then you've got a very different problem from if they're members of the public writing memos in their own templates.
Yeah. Yes, this is not a general solution in that the people that I've mostly applied this with have been legal publishing. In legal publishing, there are rigid templates. The OECD, where there are rigid templates, and business information, where the authors are effectively form-filling. If you take it out into a more general one, then there are, I think you could only do it as an interactive process. You would need to examine the file first, present the author with the styles they've used, and say, can you tell me which of these mean what? I have seen tools that use the actual formatting to try and work out what is a heading, and so on, but they're not terribly successful. So I think, yes, you're right. In the general purpose, actually it works perfectly well if someone uses the default Word templates, because they're obvious. But when people start doing manual styling, so they don't want their heading to be a heading, they actually say, I want that to be 24-point bold, then you really don't have any sensible way to extract the structure and the semantics.
Yes, can you track your system with Word documents containing lots of maths?
Lots of?
Maths.
Yes. I had to write, there is a custom style sheet I wrote that takes Word's math format and turns it into MathML badly. I'm sure someone who was better at MathML could do a better job than I did.
Well, actually, Microsoft provides an XSLT files with Microsoft Word that converts their math into MathML, and in our experience, it works very well.
I'll have to try and find that, because that would be useful.
Yeah, we patched it a bit. We made it work with XSLT2, so you might be interested. It's also in GitHub. I'll post the link.
Thank you. Well done.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks, Nick.